Think about the last time a storm pushed you into a place you hadn't planned on stopping. A place that was already there, as if it had been waiting. In one of the 3 stories tonight, there was a cabin like that. Remote, half hidden in the tree line, exactly where someone caught in a thunderstorm would look. And the door was unlocked. The kind of place that feels like luck. It wasn't luck. The door had a padlock bracket on the exterior frame, nothing on the inside. That door could only ever be secured from outside. And the window? Screwed shut from the outside. 4 screws. No way to open it from within. Around that window frame on the inside, scratches. Dozens of them. Deep, concentrated. The kind that don't come from weather or time. Someone had been kept in that cabin before our narrator walked through that door. And whoever it was never got out. Welcome back to Another World 404. Tonight we're not retelling these accounts. We're running forensic autopsies on 3 of them. 3 forests, 3 encounters. And when you lay them side by side, what emerges isn't a pattern of bad luck, it's a pattern of design. Story 1. Cherokee National Forest, Tennessee. A solo backpacker, experienced, methodical, is caught in a fast-moving thunderstorm. He finds a cabin. He walks in. That's where it unravels. Story 2. A decommissioned fire lookout tower, 70 feet up, deep in an unnamed forest. 2 friends spend the night at the top. By morning, an entire section of their only staircase had been deliberately removed, while they sat directly above it, in the dark. Story 3. Daniel Boone National Forest, Eastern Kentucky, 700,000 acres. A 15-year veteran solo camper carrying a 308 bolt-action wakes to the sound of trees being destroyed in the dark and finds his own belongings arranged at the scene. 3 men walked into those forests as experienced outdoorsmen. What they walked back as is something else entirely. Let's start with Story 1. Most people who hear this story focus on the moment the cabin caught fire. That's the wrong place to start. Start with the lock, or more precisely, the absence of one on the inside. There is a metal bracket on the exterior doorframe designed to receive a padlock. There is no latch, no bolt, no mechanism of any kind on the interior side. The door can be pushed open freely from inside, but from the outside, someone else can seal it shut, permanently. The window is the same problem, just worse. Screwed shut from the outside. 4 screws driven through the exterior frame into the sill. No way to open it from within. And around the interior window frame, the same concentrated scratches, deep grooves from what wasn't a tool. From what was, almost certainly, bare hands. What you're looking at isn't neglect. Someone built a cell inside a forest and made it look like a cabin. Now consider what else was in there. A sleeping bag, not ancient, not rotting, rolled and stored. Water jugs, canned food on the table. This was not an abandoned structure. Someone was maintaining it, coming back to it. The cabin wasn't a ruin, it was being kept operational, which means the question isn't how long it had been there. The question is, how many times it had been used before this man walked through that door. And then, the fire. The narrator describes the flames spreading with explosive, wall-to-wall speed during a rainstorm, on a cabin with a metal roof, instantaneously. That is not natural combustion. Wood treated with an accelerant mineral, spirits, diesel, or similar compounds absorbs surface moisture slowly enough that rain barely affects it. But exposed to ignition, it catches near instantly. The wood hadn't been treated during the storm. It had been loaded before the storm rolled in. Weeks, possibly months in advance. This wasn't improvisation. Someone had loaded that cabin like a device and then walked away from it, and simply waited for the forest to do the rest. The storm, the exhaustion, the instinct to find shelter, the forest supplied all of it. The cabin just had to be there. Any person who stumbled in from rain, from cold, from fear would have triggered the same sequence. It was positional. The cabin was the trap. The weather was the recruitment mechanism. And the behavior before the fire? The circling, the wall tapping, the weight pressed against the door from the other side leaning, not entering. That sequence isn't random aggression. It's a confirmation protocol. Whoever was outside wasn't checking if someone was in there out of curiosity. They were confirming the target was stationary before triggering the device. Which raises the question the original story never asks. How many people had sheltered in that cabin before this man? How many walked in during a storm, found it dry, felt lucky, and then couldn't get the window open? That question doesn't have an answer. The man who survived never went back to look for one. But roughly 800 miles to the northeast, in a stretch of forest nobody bothered to name on record, two people were about to encounter something that operated with the same level of preparation, just at a different altitude, and with more than one person involved. James was the kind of person who said yes when everyone else said no. His friend Charles was the one doing the asking, the guy in the friend group who spent his weekends on Google Earth finding places nobody was supposed to go. Most people heard Charles's pitches and went home. James heard them and asked when they were leaving. That dynamic matters, because what happened on that tower depended entirely on neither of them knowing when to stop. For this one, I want you to set aside the horror framing for a moment and think about the physics. Industrial fire tower staircases are galvanized steel grating panels, each bolted to the main frame, with 3/4 to 1 inch hex bolts. Each panel weighs between 40 and 80 pounds. To remove a full section silently, at night, requires multiple people supporting the panel weight simultaneously, a breaker bar or impact driver, and coordination between at least 2 operators working in sync. One person cannot do this quietly. This was a team operation. And what did James and Charles hear that night? Metallic clangs, grinding sounds lasting several seconds. They described it as mechanical, not footsteps, but something structural being worked on below them. That's exactly what it was. But the timing is what makes this harder to explain away. Those sounds stopped after the figure was spotted at the walkway level, meaning someone reached the top of the tower before the staircase below was fully removed. How do you reach the top of a 70-foot structure in the dark when the stairs are already partially deconstructed? You either arrived with climbing equipment and a rope, or you were already up there before James and Charles climbed that afternoon. Now, that light. They watched it for nearly 30 minutes. It moved at walking pace, but without the swing or wobble of a carried flashlight, evenly, steadily. Then once, it zipped forward an abrupt skip before settling back into the same smooth pace. Here's a more functional explanation than anything supernatural. A handoff. 2 operatives. Operative 1 holds position and kills their light. Operative 2, already placed further ahead, activates theirs simultaneously. From 70 feet up, it reads as a single source that skipped forward, clean, practiced, fast. This is a distraction protocol. Keep both targets watching the light. Keep them whispering theories at each other. Keep them looking forward and upward, while the team at the base of the tower works the bolts in the dark below. Think about what that requires. It requires pre-scouting the tower, pre-planning approach and exit routes, multiple people operating in total darkness with zero communication noise for long enough to dismantle a section of industrial staircase, and the discipline to do all of it while 2 people sit directly overhead. Whatever this was, it had structure, defined roles, a shared objective, and enough operational discipline that James and Charles heard almost nothing until the job was essentially done. That's not a random encounter. That's a plan that was already in motion before those 2 ever left the parking lot. Story 3 is the one I keep coming back to. Not because it's the most immediately violent, it isn't, but because of what the sequence implies when you read it operationally, night by night. Night 1. A campfire, burning clearly for 5 or more minutes, approximately 200 yards from the tent, visible through the tent wall, flickering, real looking. He checks it the next morning. No ash, no fire pit, no ring of stones, no scorched earth, no carbon deposits. The ground is completely undisturbed. A real campfire leaves carbon traces in the soil that are visible for months. Even a chemical cold light source leaves thermal discoloration in dry ground. This left nothing at all. It was engineered to be seen and then to disappear. That fire wasn't a campfire. It was a location confirmation. Something established the precise position of this man's tent on night 1 using a marker designed to leave no trace afterward. Night 1 was target acquisition. Night 2, 2 trees fall. No wind, no storm. One to the south, one to the northwest. A completely different part of the forest, minutes later. He tried to explain the second as a chain reaction from the first, but the directions eliminate that. 2 different axes, 2 different zones, no structural connection between them. These were 2 independent, coordinated events on the same night. And when he examined the stump, the break wasn't right. Not the jagged splinter fracture of wind stress, not the clean incision of a beaver or any tool. The wood had been worked long irregular gouges, running at multiple angles, up to an inch deep, bark stripped in long strips from the base, exposed wood beneath it chewed and torn rather than cut. Whatever brought that tree down had been working on it over time, with enough persistent force to compromise an old-growth trunk from the outside in. Night 2 was a capability demonstration. Then, the bandana and carabiner, removed from a sealed backpack while he slept, a loaded rifle within arm's reach, then placed at the base of the destroyed tree, not dropped, not left somewhere nearby, arranged, displayed in a way that would be found. In criminal behavioral science, this is called trophy displacement. An entity removes an object belonging to the target and returns it visibly as a demonstration that it was close enough to take something and chose to leave it instead. The message isn't aggression, it's information. I was right there. I had time. I made a choice. And the sound, that continuous low rumble, somewhere between a groan and a growl, running unbroken for a full minute without variation or pause. Not a bear, not an elk, not a bobcat. He'd heard all of those. This was something sustaining a sound on purpose and directing it. Night 3 was a message. So here's where the forensic read becomes uncomfortable. Taken as individual events, each element has a surface-level explanation. A misidentified light, a tree with compromised roots, misplaced gear. Any one of these alone is strange but dismissible. Together, in sequence, across 3 nights, they describe a protocol. Night 1, locate and confirm target. Night 2, demonstrate capability, induce psychological destabilization. Night 3, deliver a message through displaced objects, making sure the target understands he was never invisible. Whether the entity running that protocol is human or biological, I genuinely can't give you a clean answer, and I won't pretend otherwise. Case studies in wilderness predatory behavior, documented through both law enforcement records and forensic ecology research, show that territorial actors, human and animal, do establish long-term operational patterns in remote land that they treat as private. The cabin in Story 1 fits a human predator model almost exactly. The fire tower fits a coordinated group model. Story 3 doesn't fit either one cleanly. The physical capability required to bring down old-growth trees through direct contact, silently open a sealed pack without waking a man holding a rifle, and sustain a 60-second unbroken vocalization, that combination isn't consistent with any documented human behavioral profile. And it doesn't match any classified North American predator either. So both possibilities sit on the table, and both of them are serious. If it's human, somewhere in those 700,000 acres, there are people who watched a man sleep with a loaded rifle in his hands, went through his belongings in the dark, brought down 2 trees on consecutive nights as a display, and then chose to let him wake up and walk out. If it's biological, something is operating in deep Appalachian wilderness that is large enough to fell old-growth trees through direct physical contact, coordinated enough to execute a multi-night sequence, and deliberate enough to arrange objects as a legible message to a specific individual. Neither answer closes the file. Both of them should change the way you think about going somewhere no one knows your exact location. 3 separate forests, 3 separate years, 1 variable that runs through every account without exception. In every case, the target was off trail. unregistered, operating in a sector where no one had their precise coordinates. The cabin was off-trail. The fire tower was off-trail. The campsite in Daniel Boone was chosen specifically for its remoteness. The common variable isn't the forest, it's the absence of witnesses. Whatever these three men encountered, it knew that going in. The first man came back with second-degree burns and a story his wife still doesn't know about. The police told him what they tell most people who walk out of uncharted wilderness with unverifiable accounts. Not much. James still sees Charles. Every time they meet, without exception, without anyone needing to bring it up, they end up talking about the fire tower. Some things don't resolve. They don't fade either. They just follow you at a fixed distance for the rest of your life. And the third man still camps alone, still carries his rifle. Every time he stakes his tent in the dark, the first thing his mind goes back to is a blue bandana sitting neatly at the base of a destroyed tree. Every one of these encounters happened because the person involved was somewhere no one else knew they were. Off trail. No check-in time. No emergency contact with a current GPS pin. Invisible to everyone except whatever was already out there. The next time you're deep in backcountry miles from anyone with your location and something feels coordinated or deliberate, or wrong in a way you can't immediately articulate, don't ask yourself whether you're imagining it. Ask yourself how long it had already been going on before you noticed. 2 questions for the comments. First, if you've ever been in deep backcountry and felt something was wrong before you could explain why, I want to hear it. What it was, where it was, what made it feel different from a normal encounter? Second, and this is the one I'm genuinely still sitting with, which of these 3 do you think was human? Because I have a working read on 2 of them. Story 3 is still open. Tell me what you think. I read every single one. Welcome back to another world. 404.